Officer Derek Larson thought she was just another black woman he could intimidate until she walked into court and dismantled his career. The road was nearly empty that night, a few cars passing by, their headlights bouncing off the wet asphalt. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on a stretch of highway outside Montgomery, Alabama. It was late, just past 11 p.m., a time when most people just want to get home. Lieutenant Commander Alesha Harper had been driving for nearly 2 hours, her fingers lightly tapping the steering wheel, humming to a soft jazz tune playing through the speakers. She wasn't in uniform, just a black sweater and jeans, hair pulled back. She didn't stand out, or so she thought. Then she saw flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror, closing in fast. Her stomach tightened. Not from fear. She knew how this went, but from exhaustion. She signaled, changed lanes, and pulled over to the shoulder, parking slowly. She sighed, keeping both hands visible. She'd served in the Navy long enough to know the drill. A white patrol car stopped right behind her. The officer took his time getting out, moving like a man who expected compliance. Heavy boots, scuffing the asphalt, one hand on his belt, the other holding a flashlight that flicked as he approached. Alicia glanced at him through the side mirror. The name on his badge caught the light. Larson. License and registration, Larson said. No greeting. No explanation, his voice flat, practiced, impatient. Alicia met his eyes in the mirror, then slowly reached for the glove box, pulling out her documents. "Was I speeding, officer?" she asked, voice even. Larson didn't answer right away, taking the papers from her hand, holding them at a distance. "Your taillight's out," he said finally. She frowned. That couldn't be true. Larson looked at her. "You arguing with me?" A minute of silence passed. Alicia felt a shift in the air, that quiet, unspoken moment when power met resistance, and one side expected the other to fold. She'd seen it before, on briefings, overseas bases, training exercises meant to prepare sailors for the world beyond the Navy. She knew better than to push, but she also knew her rights. "I'm just saying," she replied, voice calm. "My taillights were checked a few weeks ago, but if there's an issue, I can fix it." "Get out of the car," Larson cut her off, like he hadn't heard a word. Alicia exhaled slowly, glancing at the empty road ahead. No witnesses. She tapped her fingers on the wheel once, then reached for the door handle. "Why?" she asked. Larson tilted his head, smirking. "Because I said so." She let that hang in the air for a second, then unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed the door open. The night air was cooler than she expected. She stepped onto the pavement, posture relaxed but controlled. She wasn't looking for a fight, but she wouldn't be intimidated either. Larson stepped back, sizing her up, as if deciding how far he could go. "Turn around, hands on the car," he said. She hesitated. "For what reason?" Larson stepped forward, smirk gone. "You resisting?" Alicia didn't back down. "No, I'm asking a question." Something flashed across his face. Irritation, amusement, maybe both. Then, without warning, he reached for his radio. "Got a non-compliant driver here," he muttered into the speaker, then louder, turning to her. Her pulse quickened, but her face stayed neutral. "Officer, you need to understand something," she said, voice low but firm. "I know exactly what I'm allowed to do, and I know exactly what you can't." Larson didn't like that. His jaw tightened. "You're under arrest. He grabbed for her wrist. Alicia pulled back just enough to avoid his grip, stepping back to evade his reach. Arrested for what? Larson yanked out his cuffs. Obstructing an officer. She exhaled sharply through her nose. So this was his game. Her military training kicked in, steady breathing, clear head. But she knew she had two choices: comply and fight it later, or resist and risk escalation. She wasn't about to become another statistic. With slow, deliberate movements, she turned, placing her hands on her car's roof, the metal cool against her palms. Larson didn't waste time, wrenching her arms behind her back, snapping the cuffs on too tight, then shoving her toward the patrol car. "You don't know what you're doing," she muttered. Larson chuckled, pushing her into the back seat. "Lady, I know exactly what I'm doing." The hard plastic seat of the patrol car dug into her back. Alicia sat still, wrists burning under the cuffs, breathing steady. The door slammed shut, locking her in. Larson strutted back to his cruiser, muttering something into his radio. She glanced at the partition separating her from the front seat, her faint reflection staring back, calm, composed, but beneath it, something simmered. She'd been through combat drills, high-stakes operations, interrogations on foreign soil, but this was different. A man with a badge, drunk on power, convinced he was untouchable. Minutes passed, 5, then 10. She shifted her hands slightly, testing the cuffs. He'd made them deliberately tight. The driver's door opened, and Larson slid in, whistling. "Well, well," he mumbled, buckling his seatbelt. "Let's take a little ride." She didn't respond. He shifted into gear, pulled off the shoulder, and merged back onto the highway, the patrol car lurching forward, overhead lights still flashing. She could see the red and blue reflections in the side mirrors, painting the road behind them. "You know," Larson said after a moment, "most people just keep their mouths shut when I tell them to get out." Alicia exhaled sharply through her nose. "And most officers don't arrest people for questioning a traffic stop." Larson laughed, shaking his head. "Lady, you must really think you're somebody." She looked at him through the glass. "I don't think I know." That made him pause, just for a second, his knuckles tightening around the wheel, a flicker of irritation breaking through his smug exterior. But he masked it quickly. "You military?" he asked, tone shifting. She didn't answer. "Yeah, I figured," he continued. "You got that attitude like you're above the law or something." He smirked. "Bet you thought I'd back off if you threw that around, huh?" She stayed silent. Larson clicked his tongue. "Shame," he mused, shaking his head. "If you'd just kept your mouth shut, we could have avoided all this." Her jaw clenched at the audacity, as if his actions were somehow her fault. The station came into view, a squat gray brick building off the main road. The parking lot was mostly empty. Late-night processing was slow, and it seemed she was the only guest. Larson pulled into a reserved spot by the entrance, cut the engine, and turned to look at her through the partition. "Gotta say," he muttered, "I love when they make it easy." Before she could respond, he stepped out, slamming the door behind him. Seconds later, her door swung open. "Let's go," he ordered. Alicia twisted her wrists slightly as she stepped out, the cuffs biting into her skin. He hadn't loosened them at all. She kept her head high as he led her inside, past a bored-looking desk sergeant, and into the processing area. The room smelled of stale coffee and sweat. A metal bench along the far wall, a steel door to the cells just beyond. Larson uncuffed her just long enough to run her through booking. Fingerprints, mugshot, the whole routine. The officers at the desk barely looked up, just going through the motions. She'd seen this kind of indifference before. It was what let men like Larson thrive. When it was done, he grabbed her wrist again, leading her to the cells. "Think you're smart, huh?" he muttered under his breath. She glanced sideways. "I don't need to think." His grip tightened. She knew she was getting under his skin. "Enjoy your stay," Larson sneered, shoving her into a cell. Alicia caught herself before stumbling, turning to face him as the metal bars slid shut between them. Larson grinned from the other side, tapping the bars lightly with his fingers before walking away. The lock clicked. She sighed slowly, then sank onto the bench, the cold metal pressing through her jeans, grounding her. One night, that's all it would take. Because Larson had no idea who he'd just messed with. The metal bench was cold, hard, unforgiving. Alicia shifted slightly to ease the stiffness creeping in. The cell wasn't much. 4 walls, a flickering light, the faint smell of old sweat and disinfectant. She'd spent nights in worse conditions, places where the threat wasn't just discomfort, but real danger. This was nothing, but that didn't mean she wasn't angry. Through the bars, she could hear the faint murmur of officers talking at the desk, the occasional rustle of papers, the clink of a coffee mug on a table. She exhaled, slow and steady, controlling her breath, her mind. Basic training drilled into her long before she ever set foot on Navy soil. Then came Larson's heavy footsteps. She knew it was him before he appeared, his stride as cocky as a man who thought himself untouchable. He stepped into view seconds later, arms crossed, that same smirk plastered on his face. "Comfy?" She didn't respond. He tilted his head, leaning closer to the bars. "You know, if you'd just played along, you wouldn't be here." She let a slow smile curl at the corners of her lips. "Oh, I'm exactly where I need to be." Larson's smirk faltered for a split second. Something flickered in his eyes, irritation, uncertainty. He masked it with a scoff, glancing around the empty holding area. "Nobody's coming for you tonight, lady," he shrugged. "Guess that means you got time to think about that attitude." Alicia just stared at him, steady, unyielding. Larson leaned in slightly. "See, here's the thing," he continued, lowering his voice. "People like you think the rules don't apply. You think a little confidence is enough to get you out of trouble." She let him talk, let him ramble. It didn't matter because he didn't know what was coming. And then, as if on cue, another officer approached from the hallway. A younger guy, maybe 30, in standard uniform, holding a tablet. Sergeant," the officer's voice carried a hint of unease. He stopped a few feet away. Larson barely glanced at him. "What?" The officer hesitated, shifting his weight. "I think you need to see this." Larson frowned. then shot Alicia one last look before stepping away. She leaned back, listening as their voices faded, catching fragments, something about a lawyer, a call from higher up, questions about why she was being held. Larson's voice dropped, sharper, lower. The younger officer stumbled over a response, but whatever it was, it didn't make Larson happy. Then the heavy footsteps returned. Larson stormed back, jaw clenched, fists at his sides, smirk gone. "What the hell did you do?" Alicia leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I didn't do anything," she said, tilting her head slightly. "But people talk, and some of us have friends in very high places." Larson's face darkened. She could see it now, the realization creeping in, the shift in power. He wasn't in control anymore. He spun on his heel, muttering under his breath, and disappeared down the hall. Alicia exhaled. It wouldn't be long now, and when the truth came out, Larson would regret every choice that led him here. Morning light streamed through the narrow windows of the courthouse, casting long stripes across the polished floors. The air inside was crisp, the kind of cold that sank into your bones if you sat still too long. Alicia stood by the defendant's table, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. No cuffs, no orange jumpsuit, no holding cell, just a well-tailored navy blazer, a simple blouse, and an undeniable presence. She wasn't alone. Beside her, her attorney, Monica Reynolds, flipped through a stack of papers, barely looking up as people filtered into the courtroom. The woman was efficient, methodical, no wasted movements, no small talk. Alicia liked that. The heavy wooden doors at the back swung open, and Larson walked in. He still carried himself like he owned the room. Shoulders back, chin slightly raised, but there was a difference now. A stiffness in his gait, a flicker of something in his expression that hadn't been there before. He wasn't so sure of himself anymore. Alicia caught his eye. He looked away. "Good." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Judge Walter Grayson, an older man with a weary face, adjusted his glasses as he settled in. He didn't waste time. "All right," he sighed, scanning the case file. "Let's get to it." The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with neatly combed hair, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the defendant, Lieutenant Commander Alicia Harper, was unlawfully detained without probable cause. Furthermore, new evidence suggests misconduct by the arresting officer, Sergeant Derek Larson." A murmur rippled through the room. Larson shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. The judge peered at him over his glasses. "Sergeant Larson, care to explain?" Larson leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the defendant refused to comply during a routine traffic stop." The prosecutor cut in. "Refused?" He turned, holding up a document. "Lieutenant Commander Harper's record shows an exemplary military career, Naval Academy graduate, multiple commendations, no criminal history, no outstanding citations. You're telling me despite all that, she was such a threat you had to arrest her over a broken taillight?" Larson opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched. The prosecutor continued, flipping through his papers. "Moreover, an internal review of your arrest history shows a disproportionate number of traffic stops involving black drivers in this area." The murmur grew louder. Larson's face darkened. Judge Grayson set his file down with a sigh. Sergeant, I don't like what I'm hearing. Larson leaned back, arms crossed. She was resisting. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. The body cam footage says otherwise. Another ripple of noise swept the room. Larson glanced at the judge, suddenly more defensive. I followed standard procedure. Judge Grayson wasn't buying it. He nodded to the bailiff. Let's play the footage. A screen lowered at the front of the courtroom, and the video began. Alicia didn't turn to watch. She'd lived it. Larson barking orders, her calm voice, the unnecessary escalation, the smug way he tightened the cuffs. The room was dead silent when the footage ended. Judge Grayson leaned forward, fingers steepled. Sergeant Larson, you violated protocol, conducted an unlawful arrest, and failed to report all details in your initial statement. Larson opened his mouth, but the judge wasn't done. The charges against Lieutenant Commander Harper are hereby dismissed. His gavel fell, sharp and final. And I strongly recommend an internal investigation into Sergeant Larson's conduct. The tension in the room snapped like a taut rubber band. Larson looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Face red, hands balled into fists at his sides. Alicia just exhaled, slow and controlled. She'd had no doubts. As she stood, gathering her things, she glanced at Larson one last time. Their eyes met. No words were needed, because this time she didn't have to fight for her reputation. Larson had done that for her. Larson bolted from the courtroom, his heavy footsteps echoing down the polished halls. He felt the stares, other officers, court staff, even reporters who'd shown up after whispers of the case spread. He wasn't used to this. He was used to control, to walking into a room and commanding respect or fear. But now, the power he'd taken for granted was slipping through his fingers. Then came the worst part. Sergeant Larson! A sharp voice cut through the hallway noise. He turned. Chief Ronald Ellis stood, arms crossed, face unreadable. An older man, over 30 years in the department, respected. His word carried weight. Larson straightened. Sir. Ellis studied him for a moment, then gave a curt nod, motioning Larson to follow him into a private office. The second the door closed, the chief's tone dropped. What the hell were you thinking? Larson exhaled sharply. I was doing my job. Your job? Ellis scoffed, tossing a folder onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. That's not what this looks like from here. The body cam footage, your arrest history, the fact you didn't even know who you were arresting. Larson's nostrils flared. What's that got to do with anything? Ellis leaned forward. Everything, he said, voice low and cutting. This wasn't some random woman. This was a high-ranking Navy officer. You think this just goes away? Larson looked away, grinding his teeth. She was disrespectful. She asked you questions, Ellis interrupted. That's not a crime. Larson smirked, shaking his head. You don't get it. People like her. Ellis's face hardened. People like what? Larson swallowed, saying nothing. Ellis sighed, rubbing his forehead. The DA's reviewing every case you've touched in the last 5 years. You've been flagged for racial profiling, and you'd better believe this department isn't going down with you. Larson's gut twisted. What's that mean? Ellis straightened. It means you're suspended, effective immediately. Internal Affairs is investigating, and if they find what I think they will, your career's done." The words hit Larson like a blow to the chest. His face burned. "This is bullshit." Ellis raised a hand. "Don't finish that sentence." His voice was ice. "Clear your desk. And if I were you, I'd get a lawyer." Larson stood there, fists clenched, his world crumbling in real time. For the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't untouchable. Across town, Alicia sat in a quiet cafe, stirring a cup of coffee as she scrolled through her phone. The case was already making headlines. The footage had gone viral. Navy officer wrongfully arrested. Officer under investigation. She wasn't surprised. She'd known from the moment she stepped out of her car that night how this would play out. She'd seen men like Larson before, arrogant, used to bending the law to their will. But this time, he'd lost. Her phone buzzed. A text from her attorney. Larson suspended, possible charges pending. Alicia took a slow sip of coffee. Good. She looked out the window, watching the city move around her. The fight wasn't over, not for her, not for the people Larson had likely wronged before, but today was a win. The fresh afternoon air carried the scent of recent rain as Alicia stepped out of the cafe. The weight of the last 24 hours should have lingered on her shoulders, but it didn't. She walked with the same confidence she always had, head high, stride even. Her phone rang again, a number she recognized. She sighed, then answered. "Captain," she greeted. A familiar voice came through. "Lieutenant Commander, I assume you've seen the news." A brief silence. "How you holding up?" Alicia glanced at her reflection in a nearby shop window. No signs of defeat, no cracks in her composure. "I feel like I did exactly what I had to do," she said. The captain's voice softened. "Figured you'd say that." A pause. "The Pentagon's taken an interest in your case. Don't be surprised if they ask you to speak on it." Alicia exhaled through her nose. "Not sure I'm interested in being a headline." "You already are," the captain countered. "And like it or not, what happened to you is part of something bigger." She knew that. She'd always known. Larson wasn't an anomaly. He was part of a system that let officers like him operate unchecked for years. This wasn't just about her. It was about dozens, maybe hundreds, of people who'd been in her position but didn't have the rank, the legal team, or the voice to fight back. Alicia leaned against a street lamp, watching traffic roll by. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," she said. "And it won't be the last." "No," the captain agreed. "But it's the first time Larson's facing consequences, and that's because you didn't back down." Alicia closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. She hadn't backed down, not when Larson stopped her, not when he tried to intimidate her, not when the cuffs snapped onto her wrists, not even when she spent a night in a cell, fully aware the odds were stacked against her. She'd stayed steady, and now she'd won. The captain cleared his throat. "One more thing," he added. "The mayor's office might reach out. Seems they want to thank you for handling this with professionalism and grace." She smirked. "That's ironic." The captain chuckled. "You gonna take it?" Alicia thought for a moment, then shrugged. "I'll think about it." She ended the call, slipping the phone back into her pocket. Across the street, A mother walked with her young son, his small hand gripping hers, laughing at something carefree, full of life. Alicia watched them for a moment. The next generation. She'd fought for herself, yes, but she'd also fought for him, for every black boy and girl who deserved to grow up in a world where men like Larson couldn't wield their badges like weapons. She took a deep breath and walked on, steps firm, purpose clear. Because this fight wasn't just hers, it never had been. Unchecked power is a poison, and the only way to change the system is to hold it accountable. What happened to Alicia happens to people every day, people without the privilege of rank, connections, or evidence to back them up. That's why it's critical to speak up, to demand change, to refuse to stay silent. If this story made you think, share it. If it made you angry, talk about it. And if it made you realize how much work is left to do, stay engaged. Because real change starts with real conversations.